live our lives in ordinary places, office buildings, apartment towers, structures of steel and concrete that we pass through every day without a second thought. We trust them. We depend on them. We believe they're safe. But what happens when the ordinary becomes extraordinary? When a simple Friday morning transforms into a nightmare that refuses to end? One of those places stands in the heart of São Paulo. You may have heard of it, you may have passed by it, you may even know its name, Joelma. A building that carries more than offices and apartments. It carries memories, it carries screams, it carries something that never left. It starts small, a short circuit, a spark. Something so mundane we wouldn't notice it in our own homes. But in the right conditions, in the right place, at the right moment, that spark becomes an inferno. And suddenly the building you walked into that morning becomes a trap. The elevator, a coffin. The stairs, blocked. The windows, your only escape. 100 meters down. We like to think tragedies happen to other people, in other places, at other times. But the truth is simpler and far more terrifying. They happen everywhere, to anyone, at any moment. And sometimes, when that horror unfolds, it doesn't just end. It lingers. It waits. It watches. Because some places don't forget. Some places hold on to their trauma, their pain, their dead. And those places change. They become something else. Something that exists between memory and presence. Between the living and the dead. Between what was and what refuses to leave. This is one of those places. This is the case of the Joelma Building, and this is its story. My name is Miguel Roti, and I bring you another Dark Archivo, Latin America. There are places that don't die, they just wait. In the heart of São Paulo, amid the urban chaos and concrete that never sleeps, stands a building that carries more than offices and apartments. It carries memories. It carries screams. It carries something that never left. This is the Joelma Building. And its story begins with fire. It was February 1st, 1974, an ordinary Friday. The suffocating summer heat pressed down on the city. On the building's 12th floor, located at the corner of Avenida São Luís and Avenida Ipiranga, a short circuit in an air conditioning unit sparked what would become one of Brazil's greatest urban tragedies. At 8:50 in the morning, the flames began to spread. Fast, violent, relentless. The Joelma had 25 floors. More than 700 people worked there that morning. The fire climbed through the ventilation ducts, fed by flammable materials and the absence of adequate fire suppression systems. There were no sprinklers. There weren't enough emergency exits. The windows became the only way out. And for many, the last thing they saw was the ground 100 meters below. The firefighters arrived quickly, but hell had already settled in. The escalators turned into furnaces. The elevator, a death trap. People crowded at the windows, waving, begging for help. Some jumped, others were consumed by flames while waiting for a rescue that would never come in time. The thick black smoke covered everything, turning day into night. Witnesses on the street looked up, horrified, unable to look away from the macabre spectacle unfolding before them. In the end, 191 people died. Some burned alive, others suffocated by toxic smoke, still others shattered on impact with the ground. The bodies were taken to the morgue, but many were so charred that identification became a bureaucratic and emotional nightmare. Entire families were destroyed. The city stopped, Brazil stopped, and Joelma became synonymous with tragedy. But the story didn't end there. Because the fire may have been extinguished, but something remained, something that never left. In the days following the fire, while rescue teams still searched through the rubble, the first reports began to surface. Firefighters who swore they heard voices calling for help on floors already evacuated. Cleaning workers who felt presences around them, as if someone was watching from the shadows. And then, the story spread. Residents and employees who returned to the building, renamed Praça da Bandeira Building in an attempt to erase the past, began reporting inexplicable phenomena. Elevators that stopped by themselves on the 12th floor, where the fire started. Doors that opened and closed with no one nearby. Whispers that echoed through empty corridors, always at night, always in the same low, desperate tone. And then the shadows appeared. Translucent human figures that appeared in window reflections, shadows that moved against the light, faces that emerged for seconds before disappearing, always on the upper floors, always in the places where victims were trapped. Urban folklore didn't take long to form. The 13 souls of Joelma became legend. 13 spirits that, according to reports, never left the building. 13 victims who didn't accept death. 13 presences that still wander the corridors, trapped in an eternal loop of despair and agony. But where did that number come from? Nobody knows for sure. Some say there were 13 bodies never identified. Others claim that 13 people died in particularly horrible circumstances, trapped in places no one could reach. Some say the number 13 was chosen for superstition, for the symbolic weight it carries. But the fact is, the legend spread. And with it, fear. In the following years, Joelma became a point of silent pilgrimage. People who lost loved ones returned to the site, leaving flowers, lighting candles, praying in front of the building. Some claimed to feel the presence of the dead. Others said they heard voices as they approached. And there were those who simply couldn't look at the building without feeling a chill down their spine. The press at the time covered the tragedy with graphic details. Photographs of bodies fallen on the sidewalk. Images of people hanging from windows, seconds before falling. Testimonies from witnesses who saw everything up close. And those images, those stories, were engraved in the city's collective memory. Joelma was no longer just a building, it was a symbol. A reminder that death can come suddenly, violently, and without warning. But there was something more. Something the newspapers couldn't capture. A sensation, a weight, a presence that seemed to emanate from the building itself. And that sensation, air of whispers, never left. In the months following the tragedy, investigations were conducted. Technical reports pointed to serious structural failures, the absence of adequate security systems, negligence on the part of those responsible for building maintenance. But no report could explain why so many people were trapped. Why the elevators didn't work, why the emergency exits were blocked, and why, even after decades, Joelma continued to haunt those who approached it. There were stories of survivors who were never the same. People who developed deep traumas, who woke up in the middle of the night screaming, reliving the horror of that day. Some could never work in tall buildings again. Others developed phobias of fire, elevators, enclosed spaces. And there were those who simply disappeared, unable to deal with the weight of memory. And then there were those who died afterward. Suicides, inexplicable accidents, sudden deaths that seemed connected somehow to Joelma. As if the building had an influence that extended beyond its walls, as if it reclaimed those who escaped, because there are places that don't die, they just wait. And Joelma, with its empty windows and silent corridors, keeps waiting. In the heart of São Paulo, amid the urban chaos and concrete that never sleeps, it stands, silent, imposing, haunted. And the question remains, what really happened that day? And what still happens every night when the lights go out and the shadows begin to move? The answer, perhaps, lies in the stories that were never told, in the screams that were never heard, in the souls that never left. Because Joelma doesn't just hold memories, it holds presences, and they never left. The official investigation into the Joelma fire was extensive, but inconclusive in many respects. The report pointed to serious structural failures, absence of adequate security systems, and negligence on the part of those responsible for building maintenance. But there was something the technical reports couldn't explain. Why were so many people trapped? Why didn't the elevators work? Why were the emergency exits blocked? Survivor testimonies reveal a scene of absolute panic. Many reported that when trying to descend the stairs, they found locked doors. Others said the smoke was so dense, it was impossible to see any exit. There were reports of people who managed to reach the roof but were trapped there, surrounded by flames until helicopters could rescue them. But not everyone had that luck. One of the most disturbing reports came from a firefighter who participated in the rescue. He told years later that upon entering one of the upper floors, he found a group of bodies piled near a window. They were embracing each other, as if they had tried to protect one another until the last moment. The scene marked him deeply, but what truly haunted him was what he swore he heard as he left that floor. A low whisper, almost inaudible, that said, "Help." He never returned to Joelma. In the 80s and 90s, the building was renovated and reopened, but the stories didn't stop. Employees of companies occupying the upper floors began reporting strange experiences. Computers that turned on by themselves, phones that rang with no one on the line, lights that flickered without explanation, and always, the sensation of being watched. A secretary who worked on the 18th floor during the 90s told a local newspaper that one night, while staying late to finish a report, she heard footsteps in the corridor. She left the room to check, but there was no one there. The footsteps continued. She followed them to the elevator. The doors opened by themselves. And then, for a brief second, she swore she saw a figure inside the elevator. A woman dressed in 70s clothing, looking directly at her. The secretary resigned the next day. Another report came from a night security guard. He worked the overnight shift and routinely made rounds through the floors. One night, passing by the 12th floor, he felt an intense cold. The air became heavy. He heard a muffled sound, as if someone was banging on the wall. He followed the sound to an empty room. The door was ajar. He entered, and then he saw handprints on the wall, dozens of them, as if someone had desperately tried to find a way out. He never went up to the 12th floor again. But the stories weren't limited to employees. Visitors, delivery people, even people passing by the building reported strange sensations. Some said they felt a deep sadness when approaching. Others claimed to hear muffled screams as if coming from far away. And there were those who simply couldn't enter the building. An invisible force, they said, prevented them. In 2004, on the 30th anniversary of the fire, a group of paranormal researchers requested permission to conduct an investigation in the building. The administration denied it, but that didn't stop reports from continuing to accumulate. Online forums, discussion groups, blogs dedicated to the supernatural all mentioned Joelma, and all repeated the same question: what really happens inside? Some say the building is cursed, that the souls of the victims are trapped in an eternal cycle of suffering. Others believe the collective trauma of the tragedy impregnated the walls, creating a kind of residual memory that manifests at specific moments. And there are those who claim that something older, something that was already there before Joelma was built, was awakened by the fire. Because, air of whispers, there are records that the land where Joelma was erected had a dark past. Before the building, an old mansion stood there, and before that, according to old reports, the site was known as a dumping ground for bodies during the early years of the Republic. Unconfirmed stories, true, but stories that refuse to die. And then there are the patterns. Small details that, when analyzed together, form a disturbing picture. Elevators that stop on the 12th floor, always at 8:50 in the morning, exactly when the fire started. Lights that flicker in sequence, always on the same floors, always in the same order. And reports from people who, when looking at the building at night, swear they see lights on in floors that should be empty. Coincidences? Perhaps. But coincidences that repeat with disturbing regularity. There are also contradictory testimonies. Some people claim Joelma is just an ordinary building, that the stories are exaggerations fueled by tragedy. Others say there's something profoundly wrong with the place. And there are those who simply refuse to talk about it, as if mentioning the building would invite something unwanted into their lives. A former resident, who lived in Joelma for 3 years during the 2000s, told in an anonymous interview that he never felt alone in the apartment. There was always the sensation that someone was there, watching. He tried to ignore it, tried to rationalize. But one night, waking in the middle of the night, he saw a shadow standing in the corridor. It didn't move, just watched. He turned on the light, the shadow disappeared. He moved out the following week, and then there are the records. Old photographs, taken in the days following the fire, that show disturbing details. Faces in windows, shadows that shouldn't be there. figures appearing in the background, always blurred, always indistinct. And these photographs, kept in newspaper and museum archives, continue to intrigue those who study them. There's one photograph in particular that became famous. Taken by a photojournalist on the day of the fire, it shows the building engulfed in smoke. But if you look carefully in the upper right corner, you can see something. A figure. Human. Standing in a window that should be empty. The figure is blurred, but unmistakable. And when the photo was enlarged, years later, disturbing details emerged. The figure seemed to be looking directly at the camera, as if it knew it was being photographed. The photojournalist who took the photo never wanted to talk about it. When questioned, he simply said there were things better left in the past. He died in 1998, taking his secrets to the grave. Because Joelma isn't just a building, it's an enigma, a mystery that refuses to be solved. And the more you investigate, the more questions arise. More reports appear, more stories are told. And the sensation that something is wrong, that something never left, only intensifies. There are also the rituals. Esoteric groups that over the years performed ceremonies in front of the building. Attempts to cleanse the place, to free the trapped souls, to end the cycle of suffering. But no ritual worked. The stories continued, the reports persisted, and Joelma remained haunted. Joelma isn't just a building. It's a symbol, a reminder that tragedies don't erase with renovations or name changes. They remain, they echo, and sometimes they manifest. In 2014, on the 40th anniversary of the fire, a ceremony was held in front of the building. Families of victims gathered to pay tribute. Flowers were laid, candles were lit, and, according to witnesses, something strange happened. The candles all went out at the same time, even without wind. And then, for a few seconds, absolute silence took over the place, as if the entire city had stopped to listen. A photographer covering the event captured an image that went viral. In the photo, taken from ground level toward the upper floors, you can see several windows. And in one of them, on the 12th floor, a human figure. Blurred, translucent, but unmistakable. The building administration stated that floor was empty at the time of the photo, but the image remains, and no one could explain it. In recent years, Joelma has again become the subject of documentaries, podcasts, and reports. Each new generation rediscovers the tragedy, and each new generation brings new reports. App delivery drivers who refuse to go above the 10th floor. Cleaning staff who request transfers after a few weeks. Visitors who leave the building pale, trembling, swearing never to return. And then there are the patterns. Small details that, when analyzed together, form a disturbing picture. Elevators that stop on the 12th floor, always at 8:50 in the morning, exactly when the fire started. Lights that flicker in sequence, always on the same floors, always in the same order. And reports from people who, when looking at the building at night, swear they see lights on in floors that should be empty. Coincidences? Perhaps. But coincidences that repeat with disturbing regularity. There are also contradictory testimonies. Some people claim Joelma is just an ordinary building, that the stories are exaggerations fueled by tragedy. Others say there's something profoundly wrong with the place, and there are those who simply refuse to talk about it, as if mentioning the building would invite something unwanted into their lives. A former resident, who lived in Joelma for 3 years during the 2000s, told in an anonymous interview that he never felt alone in the apartment. There was always the sensation that someone was there, watching. He tried to ignore it, tried to rationalize. But one night, waking in the middle of the night, he saw a shadow standing in the corridor. It didn't move, just watched. He turned on the light. The shadow disappeared. He moved out the following week. And then there's the question no one can answer. Why Joelma? Why? Why does this building, among so many others that were also scenes of tragedies, carry this aura of mystery and fear? Is it because of the magnitude of the tragedy, the number of victims? Or is there something more, something that can't be explained by technical reports or rational analyses? Perhaps the answer lies in the building itself, in the walls that witnessed despair, in the corridors that echoed the last screams, in the windows that saw the final moments of so many lives. Perhaps Joelma isn't just a building, perhaps it's a receptacle, a place where trauma crystallized, where pain became tangible, where memory refuses to disappear. Or perhaps, Air of Whispers, Joelma was never just a building. Perhaps it has always been something more, something that was there before the fire, something that remained after, something that still waits. Because there are places that don't die, they just wait, and Joelma keeps waiting. In the heart of São Paulo, amid the urban chaos and concrete that never sleeps, it stands, silent, imposing, haunted, and the question remains, what really lives inside that building? Are they just memories, echoes of a tragic past? Or is there something active, something conscious, something that never left? The answer, perhaps, lies in the shadows dancing in the windows, in the whispers echoing through empty corridors, in the gazes you feel but never see. Because Joelma doesn't just hold stories, it holds presences, and they never left. There are records that during renovation work in the 80s, workers refused to work on certain floors. Some reported hearing voices, others saw tools moving by themselves, and there were those who simply abandoned the work without explanation, without prior notice. The administration tried to suppress the reports, but the stories leaked and spread. And then there are the rituals, esoteric groups that over the years performed ceremonies in front of the building, attempts to cleanse the place, to free the trapped souls, to end the cycle of suffering. But no ritual worked. The stories continued, the reports persisted, and Joelma remained haunted. Because, Air of Whispers, perhaps it's not possible to cleanse a place like this. Perhaps the trauma is too deep. Perhaps the memories are too strong. Or perhaps, just perhaps, Joelma doesn't want to be cleansed. Perhaps it wants to remember. Perhaps it needs to remember. And while the city continues to grow, while new buildings rise and old stories are forgotten, Joelma remains, silent, imposing, haunted. A reminder that some tragedies never die. They just wait. And Joelma keeps waiting. In the heart of São Paulo, amid the urban chaos and concrete that never sleeps, it stands. And the shadows continue to dance in the windows. The whispers continue to echo through the corridors. And the presences remain there. Watching, waiting, never leaving. There are also the stories of firefighters that were never officially disclosed. Reports of men who entered the building during the fire and came out changed. Some developed serious psychological problems. Others abandoned the profession. And there were those who simply couldn't talk about what they saw inside. As if Joelma had left a mark on them, an invisible scar that never healed. A retired firefighter, in an interview given years later, revealed that during the rescue, while climbing the stairs, he felt he wasn't alone. There was something there, something watching him, something following him. And when he finally reached the top, when he looked back, he saw shadows, dozens of them, moving on the stairs, climbing, as if they too were trying to escape. He never spoke about that day again, because there are places that don't die, they just wait. And Joelma, Air of Whispers, keeps waiting, in the shadows, in the whispers, in the presences that never left. And the question remains, echoing through empty corridors, whispering in dark windows, what really lives inside that building? This narrative was carefully researched and written by me, Miguel Roti, using powerful AI investigative tools to uncover supernatural cases across Latin America. Stories like these remind us that the occult is always present, lurking in the shadows of our everyday lives. If this story resonated with you and left you with that familiar chill down your spine, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and share your thoughts. Follow Dark Archivo Latam for more stories that blur the line between history and horror, and get my books on Amazon and Hotmart. There are still many dark facts waiting to be researched and brought to light. Thank you for listening, Air of Whispers. Until the next Dark Archivo.